Hi friends, welcome back to RS Tech Views. This is Rashekar. Today we are going to discuss about the constructors, classes and objects, a part 2 video this. So what is a constructor? A class contains the constructors that are invoked to create objects from the class blueprint. Constructor declarations look like method declarations, but constructor name should be the class name and it doesn't return any value. So this is the syntax. So we should mention the public and the class name. This should be give the class name. Whatever the class name, we mention it. So the class name should be give here. So here the parameter list. And the parameter list is our choice. I mean, you can pass it the zero arguments or you can pass it the empty. I mean, you can pass the empty parameter list or the parameters, you can pass it n number of parameters. So this is the syntax. So inside of the this constructor, you can mention it. I mean, you can assign the values or you can call it any method or you can call it the superclass or anything. So we have the constructor creation rules. So basically three constructor creation rules is there. Constructor name and the class name should be the same. And the second rule is should not provide the return type. So we should not give the return type to the constructor. Okay. Third point is constructor should not be abstract, static, final, unsynchronized. So these are the new things. So we will discuss later videos. So each and every thing, I mean, abstract is a separate concept, static separate concept, final separate concept, and synchronizer is a separate concept. So we'll discuss the later. So you just remember this point. Constructor should not be the abstract and static, final and synchronized. Next one. Two types of constructors. Basically, in constructors, two types are there. Default constructor or zero argument constructor. The second one is parameterized constructor. So we'll go one by one. Okay. So default constructor. So this one is we can call it as a zero argument constructor also. There are these are the user can explicitly create a zero argument constructor. So default constructor and zero argument constructor. So we can call it any name. So I will give an example of this. So how the default constructor and how the zero argument constructor. Okay, we'll see one example for this one. Next is parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. This constructor user only create and pass the values. Okay, so we'll see one example. See, I will create one class. That one is will give like a student class. Okay, so I will give the main method also in the same class. Okay, so here this string name of the student section. Okay, there's a class. So I declare some parameters. Now I'm creating the class. So we have that how many things is there: constructors, default constructor, and parameterized constructor. Okay, so two constructors. What is the default constructor? Default constructor is if user directly create like a student st1 equals to new student. Okay, so it created object, I mean it initialized the object, and you can assign the value and you can retrieve the value. Okay, so mainly without constructor we can't create an object. Okay, so without constructor we can't create an object, right? So but here is no constructors, how it created the object. It created the object and we are initializing the value, right? Name equals to st1 dot name equals to, can give like long. Okay, so and you can print the statement system dot out dot println. You can pass it st1 dot name. So if I run this program, it will give that output. So what is that? Rum. How it is creating? So the constructor is not there in the class student. So it create the object and it assign the value and it printing the values. How? In internally, whenever the compiler compiles, if that any constructor, I mean if no constructor is available in that class, the compiler will create the default constructor. So the default constructor looks like this: student, and this is the default constructor it looks like. Okay, so that one is in the source file. We don't have any, I mean we didn't create the student constructor. Whenever code compile, it will compile the code and it will create the default constructor in .class file. Okay, so whenever run that .class file, so it will create a new object and it will assign and will return the values. This is the procedure. So in the default constructor we call name as zero argument constructor. Zero argument constructor also the same thing. The zero argument constructor user can declare the zero argument constructor like the same thing. So zero argument thing, it means in this brackets we didn't pass it anything. So that this one, if the users specifically mentioned like this, so this is user defined zero argument constructor. Okay, next, parameterized constructor. What is a parameterized constructor? So the object initialization will happen whenever the constructor declared, right? So this constructor, it will initialize the object, right? So in the same time I'm just passing to initialize the values. Okay, I just pass the name. I will give the student name. Okay, name equals to student name. See, I'm passing the zero, parameterized constructor. If you see in the line number 15, it giving the compilation error. Why? Because in here the constructor, it has the one parameterized, so we should pass the parameter. So here is the zero argument is there. Okay, that's why it giving the compilation error. We should pass the value, otherwise user should create one more constructor, that is the zero argument constructor. See, now no compilation error here. Okay, so this is the parameterized constructor and default constructor. In the parameterized constructor, in this place you can mention it n number of variables, you can pass it n number of things, there is no problem, there is no limit also. But you should remember, so whatever you needs, that things only you should pass it, otherwise it leave it the other fields. Okay, and whenever you're creating the parameterized constructor, you just remember the point to create that the zero argument constructor also. Because see, so we already mentioned it like this, right? If sometime, in assume like that existing project is there, an existing project, so that one file is already created in some months back. Okay, 2 or 3 months back, the file, that class is created, and some place they created the new instance, and they worked on that. Okay, so after some time, so another developer came, they added only the parameterized constructor. So previous there is no constructor, so that user created the parameterized constructor. So if it creates like that, so it will break the existing scenarios. Existing code, they already created the new object. Okay, so it will break that one. So we should not break like that. If you wants to create the parameterized constructor, first at least mention it that zero argument constructor. Okay, and um we know the point, first point, right? The default constructor, if the user doesn't create a constructor, it will create the default constructor to the system, right? But if the user creates any constructor, on the time system doesn't provide the default constructor, because user knows he created the parameterized constructor, so that user only can do to create the zero argument constructor. So system doesn't create, doesn't provide the default constructor, zero argument constructor, user should create that one. So this is the constructor concept. Okay, so we can go for another one. So thank you, please subscribe RS Tech News, press the bell icon, like the video, and share the video.